Don't you love me? Yeah. I love the way she prays. Yeah. Yes, you do. Really? No, you don't. Not in reality, no. Oh, really? You just think. It's 5 o'clock. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. The time is 5 p.m. and the regular meeting of the following will come to order. The Victorville City Council and the same council also sitting as the Victorville Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency, the City is Housing Asset Successor, Joint Powers Financing Authority, and the Victorville Water District. Madam Clerk, will you kindly call the roll?
Councilmember Becerra.
Present.
Councilmember Gomez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Present.
Mayor Jones.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, before we move on to the introduction to public comments, are there requests to speak, Madam Clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, with that said, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the declaration of closed session items by our city attorney, Mr. D. Bortnowski.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. We have 3 items this evening. The first is existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9 D1. Excuse me, that's somebody texting about closed session. The case number and name of the case is set forth on the agenda. Items A and B under the Water District are real property negotiations pursuant to Government Code 54956.8 and deals with the acquisition of water rights, and the negotiating parties are set forth on the agenda. To the extent there's reportable action, we will report it either the conclusion of the closed session or the commencement of the regular 6 o'clock session.
All right, thank you, Mr. D. Bortnowski. With that said, we're going to go ahead and recess to closed session, and we will resume our open session at 6 p.m.
Almost done.
Okay.
Think she's part of the group, but I'm not sure. And then I know the bell was gonna ring. Good luck.
Good evening. Today is Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. The time is 6 p.m. and we are resuming the open session of our regular meeting, the following of which will come to order. The Victorville City Council and the same council also sitting as the Victorville Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency, the City as Housing Assets successor, Joint Powers Financing Authority, and the Victorville Water District. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Becerra,
Present.
Councilmember Gomez,
Buenas tardes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving,
Present.
Mayor Jones.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. All right, moving on to closed session announcements. Mr. DeBortnowski, are there any announcements to be made?
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Yes, there are this evening. First, we had the first item A for the city council was existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1. The parties and the case number set forth on the agenda. There is no reportable action with respect to that item. The next two items are for the Victorville Water District. They are real property negotiations pursuant to Government Code 54956.8. And the parties related to those are listed on the agenda. With respect to Water District Item A, the council agreed on a 3-1 vote to purchase water rights from the Soapland Revocable Trust, 478 acre feet for a total amount of $645,300. With respect to Item B, and by the way, the vote on that was 3-1 with Councilmember Gomez voting no. With respect to Item B under the Water District agenda, the Water District agreed to purchase 3,800 acre feet of water for a total price of $5,225,000. Again, the vote on that was 3-1, again with Councilmember Gomez voting no. The total price of both purchases comes to $6,296,000, and that includes a small percentage of both brokerage fees and escrow fees. So that is a reportable action, authorize the purchase of those water rights.
All right, thank you, Mr. DeBortnowski. And now we're going to move on to conflict of interest declarations. Any council members, do you have anything to declare?
No, ma'am.
Hearing none, seeing none, we're going to move on to the introduction to public comments. But before I do that, Madam Clerk, do we have requests to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. All right, well, welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Victorville City Council. Your city council is interested in your ideas and opinions and furthermore endeavors to incorporate them into its deliberations. At the same time, the council must be able to carry out its business in an organized and efficient manner free from material disruption. Therefore, this meeting will be administered in accordance with the council's established policies and procedures and Government Code Section 54957.9. Individuals may speak on agenda items or on issues not posted on the agenda during the public comments section, providing those issues are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Individual speakers may address the council once per public comment period and once per each public hearing item for up to 3 minutes. Additional time may be allocated for appeal hearings in accordance with the city's adopted policy and procedures manual, and those who desire to comment on a public hearing item may wish to reserve their remarks until that particular hearing item has been opened. All testimony is to be directed solely to the council, and although open meeting laws do not permit council meetings to engage in dialogue with any speaker during the public comment periods, please know your comments and questions may be taken into consideration by council members when discussing the particular agenda item. The presiding officer may briefly respond or have staff respond to statements or questions, or may request that the staff report back to the council at a subsequent meeting. Speakers are requested to comment as briefly as the subject permits. Individual council members who speak as a member of the public do so without the semblance or presumption of authority derived from her public office and are subject to the same meeting rules of conduct and decorum as other public participants. Whether attending this meeting in person or via Zoom, once comments are invited, the speaker will be called on by name, then recognized by the presiding officer. The speaker will state the item number that will be addressed or that the subject is a non-agendized matter. Audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of this meeting. And those who do are subject to removal from the meeting pursuant to Penal Code Section 403. Your understanding and cooperation are appreciated. And having said all that, I recognize that I have skipped an important part of our agenda, which is to ask our city clerk to present the agenda. And Madam Clerk, before you do that, we are going to make a slight modification to our agenda, and we're going to take up agenda item number 10 prior to our public hearing item, which is item number 1. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one revision to the agenda, and that is for item 10. There's a change to the staff report under the fiscal impact section. The last paragraph added should read as follows. Per the city's debt management policy, policy number CP-18-06, revised February 19th, 2019, the calculation of debt burden must be performed relative to the general fund. However, debt that is backed by the general fund but expected to be paid out of other revenues may be deducted from this calculation, provided that the city has a demonstrated track record of collecting such revenues. Net revenues after operating expenses provide reasonable coverage over debt service, and the city expects that the available revenues will be sufficient to cover debt service for the remaining life of the obligations. Therefore, this debt issuance passed the general fund debt burden test as Victorville Municipal Utilities Services, VMUS, meets the criteria for payment of such debt.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And then again, once again, in my excitement for our agenda tonight, I skipped two very important parts of our agenda, which I never do, which is the invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance. So as we don't have a pastor with us this evening, I'm going to lead us in prayer and then follow that. That will be followed by the pledge to our great flag by Captain John Wickham. So if everyone will please stand if you're able. Father in heaven, we're so thankful that you've allowed us to come together this evening, and we know that you say whenever there's two or more gathered in your name, there you are with us, and we trust and rely on that. Father, we pray that you will help us make decisions tonight that are in line with your wisdom and your ways, Lord, and we know that good things come when we follow what you want us to do specifically for our city. And sometimes, Lord, we're in the fire because some decisions are very difficult to make. And yet we know if we do what is right and honorable in your sight, we are not going to be affected by the stench of smoke or even be singed in any way by it. So we trust in your word, saying that you will give us wisdom to us when we ask for it. And we trust that you're going to give that to us tonight. Please be with us and guide our every decision. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, well, again, I thank everyone for their patience and their forbearance. And now, Madam Clerk, we'll take our first speaker from Chambers if we have any.
Our first speaker is Brianne.
From in Chambers?
Yes. Is it Brianne? Brianna? No? We'll move on to the next speaker, Jose Chavez.
Welcome, sir. So good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Evening, council members. Thank you for having me. My name is Jose Chavez. I'm with the Family Assistance Program. I'm a TAY case manager, which is transitional aged youth. This is a population between the ages of 18 to 24, and we're trying to get down to the nitty gritty of what services we could provide them, providing them supportive services as far as creating a safety net to keep them from becoming homeless chronically. I just want to thank you for continuing to support us in everything that we do over there in downtown Victorville. Yes, there is a population that's starting to grow more, and we're starting to see it's more relevant with our young youth, typically between the ages of maybe 16 and up. We're doing our best, and we just want to say thank you guys for always being consistently out there with us. Becerra was out there not too long ago, and we were putting in some work out there. Thank you. That was really awesome to see you out there. And then Mayor Deborah Jones, thank you for your acts of humility when we do see you out there. Just like to see, a little bit more, come on down. We'd like to see, some more council members down there. Actually, just seeing what we do here at the FAM spot, which is located off 16th C Street. If you guys even want to do some street outreach, I know that sounds it might sound a little off the wall, but I think if you come on down and actually get to know some of our youth, you would really get to love and understand where they're coming from. Just keep it sweet, short and sweet tonight. But thank you, council members. I appreciate it once again. You have a wonderful night. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you. Madam Clerk.
Our next speaker is Dolores Williams.
Good evening, Ms. Williams. We're happy to have you with us.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm speaking on behalf of the CBDG grant, item number 11. I missed my opportunity last time, so I was told I could come in and speak regarding my grant proposal that I submitted. First of all, I want to thank you for the past funding that the councils have approved for us. And I'm asking you again to fund our program, the Millionaire Mind Kids Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Math. We have over 8 academies. We've been in business here and serving the communities since 2005. All of our programs are free to the community with meals. And it gives our students an opportunity to spend some time over summer. We take them off the streets, take them out of trouble, and actually help them to discover careers that they may not be aware of. So I'm asking you to fund again our program. I'm asking you to fund it in the full amount for $10,000. I know you usually fund it for $3,500, but our program has grown tremendously. We have served more than 10,000 students and families here in the high desert, and we have expanded tremendously. So thank you for hearing me, and please, please, please consider approving the full amount for our program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. We appreciate you. Madam Clerk.
There are no additional in-chamber speakers.
Yes, I would like to speak as well.
Thank you. So Ms. Gomez is going to speak as a member of the public. If you'll make your way to the podium. And this, Ms. Gomez, as you approach the podium, will you please let us know as to which items you're going to address, or if it's a non-agendized matter?
So coming here, I see a lot of new faces and a lot of new individuals, and I want to take the opportunity to say that you're very welcome to have open arms in the city council. You look like you're underage, and I introduced myself, gave you my phone number, and 6 of you kids, I kind of had a little bit interaction. And I want you to know that this is your place. You're welcome here to talk to any council member that you desire to speak with. We're all very approachable. You just have to pick who you'd like to speak with each one of us. And it's unfortunate that we didn't take the time to let you know that even though this looks very court type, interfering with having police in the back and saying that we might arrest you because of PC 403, our intention is never to use that terminology so that it sticks in your mind as you're not allowed to speak. Actually, you are. If you would like to raise your hand or simply say, I'd like to speak, you don't have to feel embarrassed. You can come in. That's your First Amendment right to give your comment. If you'd like to sing, if you'd like to take a moment to congratulate whatever's happening with your family, you're more than welcome. Under public comments is the perfect opportunity for you. You have a voice and a platform here. I don't turn around and look at you just because I don't want my attention called, because this is part of the platform that I also use to ensure that you're being welcomed and you feel as comfortable as possible. And I also like to take the moment to say that if at any moment you feel any weariness or anything that you feel uncomfortable, make sure you come to any of us and let us know your concerns, because this place is your place. It's paid by tax-paying dollars. It looks like 4 beautiful walls, but in essence, it's a way for you to feel like it's your sanctuary and for you to feel like you can come and ask us anything, because we do deal with $297 million for this year, and everything that we appropriate, whether it's for parks, whether it's for permits, whether it's for anything that it may be, it really jeopardizes and it could put a sting in your family's income, because if you don't have, let's say, a park that's ADA compliant or broken swings or children that are not accessible in your family that they can come and have fun during Easter, I mean, that's something that the city needs to become aware of and address. And a lot of the times we may not be there knocking down at your door, but we may be at the grocery store and take some time to say, hi, I represent you. How can I help you? And leave. And then know that when any issues come across your way, I know I'm a resource of abundance. I know Family Assistance was up here. I don't visit Family Assistance to say hi to anybody. I actually do civil, do their taxes. That's what they help with. Also civil restraining orders. I've taken several people. So I use them as a resource for individuals who actually need help or assistance, and they fall below
Time is up.
the federal poverty guideline. Thank you.
Ms. Gomez. All right. So again, Councilmember Gomez was speaking as a member of the public, and just as a point, the chair did most certainly welcome every audience member to this meeting this evening and made sure that they were aware that their ideas and their thoughts were important to the council. All right, Madam Clerk, any other requests in chambers?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, with that said, then in chambers comments have concluded. We're going to move on to Zoom request to speak. Madam Clerk.
Our first speaker is Roger LaPlante.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. LaPlante.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. I want to thank the Mayor of Victorville for coming out to the Black Chamber of Commerce last night for a political forum. Thank you for paying attention to democracy. It was nice to see you there, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I want to talk tonight about the Victorville, Southern California Logistics Air Base, formerly known as George Air Base. I drove over there yesterday when I went to Atlanta Stadium, and I drove through, and there's still absolutely no cleanup being done on one part of the air base, but the other part is being built up, which I congratulate the city for a job well done, bringing jobs to the working families here in the Victor Valley. But I respectfully ask that we try to figure out a way that we can clean that old housing up. It looks embarrassing for the city. It's an obvious eyesore and a liability. There's broken glass. I mean, those buildings are decrepit. I know there's environmental impact studies that need to be done. It's a Superfund site. we need to hammer the federal government to clean that place up for the residents that live there. There are homeless shelters there now. And it's a toxic Superfund site that we bought from the federal government. And we're responsible for that area. And I respectfully ask if we could, some of the candidates ran on that issue, and I would just respectfully ask that we could put that on the agenda somehow and get that place cleaned up, build it up better, and go from there. And make Victorville a desirable place to come to live and work and raise your family. Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
Thank you, Mr. LaPlante. We appreciate your comments. Madam Clerk,
Our next speaker is Galaxy A12.
welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
We can, and welcome to our meeting.
Thank you. So listen, I'm really agitated. I have something I'm going to talk about here in a second, but I personally feel that the presiding officer, the chair, should restrict future allowances of Councilmember Gomez to speak as a member of the public, because she's never spoken just as a member of the public, or rarely. It's always from the position of a council member. And if that would be anybody else, the audio would be disconnected from that. And I think it should be. I just think it's totally wrong, and it's a direct violation of the directive of the chair, not something I appreciate or respect. It's not respectable behavior, period. So put that aside, and I'm going to mention something that I was highly alarmed by, Madam Mayor and Council. I believe it was the last council meeting. I was listening to public comments. I'm not going to call the person out by name, but I'm going to tell you why I'm alarmed by it. Because this person has only recently appeared on the scene via Zoom. I don't know if they've ever been there in public when it was open, when the chambers were open, during the off and on with the COVID thing. But I will tell you, this person's ranting and raving was so incredibly off the hook. I was stunned. I was frightened by the amount of rage in this individual's voice, and it was difficult for that person to calm down, and that seems to be the MO of every time. And I'm trying to figure out how a person who doesn't come to the meetings, hasn't been on Zoom, hasn't been in chambers, can get that worked up over what? I have no idea, because it's nonsensical. But I will tell you, and I know my time is probably running out, but I will tell you, I am alarmed and I am fearful for the safety of this council as a result of that man's uncontrolled rage and anger. I've never heard in my entire life anything like that. I mean, I've gotten mad and I've gone off, but I paled in comparison to what this gentleman's doing. And personally, Madam Mayor and Council, with all due respect, the chair, I believe, should cut that person off. As soon as that insanity raging starts, the nonsense, cut that off. And that's all I have, Madam Mayor and Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. So just as a matter of clarification, council members are permitted to go to the podium and speak as members of the public. It's not generally something that one would consider as best practice, but it's certainly something that can be done. And so our council member having done that this evening was certainly appropriate. All right, Madam Clerk.
Our next speaker is Soto.
Good evening. This says Planning Commission on it.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Yes, I'm a planning commissioner for the city of Adelanto. This is Miguel Soto speaking. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the city council. Some positivity tonight. I am a little late, but I did want to thank the mayor and the council for passing the wellness center. I think that was a great decision, and I'm glad that you guys worked that out. That's all I wanted to hop on and say, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Mr. Soto. We appreciate your comments. Madam Clerk.
There are no additional speakers.
All right, with that said, Madam Clerk, will you kindly set the timer for 30 seconds since there are no further requests to speak? And that this is being done to assist members of our Zoom audience that might be experiencing technical difficulties so that they might provide public comment if they desire.
Madam Mayor, 30 seconds has lapsed and there's no additional speakers.
All right, that being said, the chair closes our public comment period and brings the item back to the council. We're now going to move into our first business of order, which is going to be in the written communications section. We're a little bit out of order. We're going to take up item number 10 first. And that is consideration of resolution number 22-036, authorizing the issuance and sale of City of Victorville electric revenue bonds to finance the costs of certain improvements to, or necessary or convenient in connection with the use and operation of, the city's electric system, and to refund certain outstanding bonds previously issued for those purposes. Consideration for approval by the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority of a form of bank consent that provides BNP Paribas consent, subject to certain terms and conditions for the trustee to send out an optional redemption notice to the owners of the 2007A bonds. Mr. Metzler, will you kindly introduce the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. In 2007, the city issued variable rate lease revenue bonds in the order of approximately $83 million, secured by a variety of city-owned assets, including City Hall, the fire stations, the Victorville Police Station, and a variety of city parks, all as collateral. That 2007 bond issuance was completed for the purpose of supporting the Victorville Municipal Utility Services electric utility system. And that issuance was helpful to the city in that it allowed the city to provide a more cost-effective electric utility service to new and expanding customers. In fact, VMIS electric system has played a large role in facilitating customer growth at the Southern California Logistics Airport, which includes nationally and internationally recognized companies such as Keurig Dr. Pepper, the Boeing companies, and soon to be Amazon, just to name a few. For over a year now, staff has been working with a finance team for the purpose of refunding those 2007 variable rate lease revenue bonds with a fixed rate debt instrument and raising new money to facilitate VMIS cash flow to upgrade and expand electric service at SCLA so that VMIS can keep up with customer growth. The team that we have assembled include representatives from Urban Futures as the city's financial advisor, Oric, Harrington, and Sutcliffe as the bond counsel on this transaction, Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Routh as the disclosure counsel, the Bank of New York Mellon as the trustee, and Goldman Sachs as the underwriter. Those representatives are in attendance. I believe they're all in attendance on Zoom, and they're certainly available for any questions related to their areas of responsibility in this particular transaction. Tonight's item includes a series of documents that have been prepared and reviewed by the aforementioned participants. Those documents include an indenture of trust and a supplemental indenture, a bond purchase agreement, a continuing disclosure certificate, a bank consent from BNP Paribas, along with a preliminary official statement and an accompanying resolution. Altogether, with council's approval tonight, the city will be authorizing Goldman Sachs to begin the marketing for sale, 2 series of bonds, which include both a taxable series and a tax exempt series of bonds. This approval being sought establishes a limit on the value of said bonds, which are not to be issued in excess of $60 million and not exceed a true interest cost of 5%. Based upon market estimates provided at the time the staff report was written, the proposed sale would generate sufficient money to refund the $43.57 million of 2007 bonds that remain outstanding and generate new money proceeds sufficient to pay for the VMIS project costs along with the cost of the bond issuance in and of itself. Finally, the bonds are secured by a pledge of net revenues of the electric utility system and not a pledge of the city's general fund. However, in the event of a financial draw on bond reserves to pay debt service associated with these bonds, staff is required to ask City Council to consider replenishing the bond reserves. With approval tonight, we anticipate pricing to occur on May 5th, and we hope to close the issuance somewhere around May 19th. And then finally, just to reiterate the addendum to the staff report tonight, that is a compliance item with our debt management policy. That is one test that we read into the record to make sure that we in fact satisfied that test that's outlined in our debt management policy. So with that, Madam Mayor, that's all I have at this time. Your authors on the item are your Finance Director, Mr. John Mendiola. It's co-authored by your Director of Electric Utility Services, both attendants here personally in the audience. Your Director of Utility Services is Miss Brenda Hampton, but we also have the much larger team available for any questions or comments you might have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Metzler. Madam Clerk, will you read the recommendation, please?
That the Honorable City Council adopt resolution number 22-036, authorizing the issuance and sale of City of Victorville electric revenue bonds to finance the cost of certain improvements to or necessary or convenient in connection with the use and operation of the city's electric system, and to refund certain outstanding bonds previously issued for those purposes, approving the form and the execution and delivery of documents related to the issuance and sale of bonds, and authorizing certain other actions in connection with the issuance and sale of bonds. That the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority Board approve the form of bank consent among the city, the authority, and BNP Paribas that provides BNP's consent for the trustee to send out an optional redemption notice to owners of the 2007 A bonds and describes the terms and conditions under which this consent is given.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, now we're going to move on to technical questions for clarification as it directly relates to the staff report. We're going to begin with Member Becerra.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Metzler, just two quick questions. We're basically refinancing our bonds, correct, at a lower rate?
We're refinancing the bonds that currently exist at a true interest cost that does bring present value savings.
And all this, with Goldman Sachs and the disclosure in reading urban features and all of them are on board the way we're refinancing our bonds, correct?
They are, and in fact, we assembled this team through a public solicitation. We actually invited a competition for our business to actually participate in this envisioned bond issuance. This vision actually took place maybe a year and a half ago. And so with that, those folks that I identified actually play a very specific and precise role that actually in the aggregate make up the effort to collectively issue these bonds.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Certainly. Yes, certainly. Thank you. Member Gomez.
So we're talking about VMIS when we talk about electrical system, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so I'm thinking, why are we issuing a bond? I know we talked about refi, but it looks like we're also going to issue a bond. And is this type of loan a sort that we need to pay back with what revenues?
So it's not a loan, it's actually a bond issuance. These are securities that get actually sold out to the public markets. There is an obligation to repay these bonds on an annual basis. The security repayment for these bonds are what's defined as net revenues of the electric utility system. So net revenues being effectively after the electric utility buys the power, sells the power, pays for the costs associated with the system. Amounts that are net to that system then are what's available to pay a debt service.
Okay, and then you said not to exceed 5%, no more than 60 million. What does all that mean in the city's coffers? for the city's coffers?
So it doesn't mean anything yet in the term of the city's coffers. Effectively, those numbers serve as limits for us to work within. And it allows the marketing team effectively to go to the market. And so long as we don't exceed those limits, we can actually pursue the transactions effectively, what you're being asked to approve here with those numbers being identified.
And is there no other time better than right after COVID-19, the pandemic crisis, to think about $16 million in that 5%? In other words, why just specifically after this crisis?
Well, this response has no relationship to the COVID crisis. Instead, it has more of a relationship to what the electric utility system needs. And one of the things that we have talked about, certainly here at the council level, has been the explosion in growth out at SCLA. And as we've seen all of the new industrial customers either locating to SCLA or expanding at SCLA, there's been an increase in demand for the electric utility itself. And one of the issues that we've talked about on many occasions is the realized capacity constraint that currently exists at SCLA. That capacity constraint, I think, is better described as only being allowed to convey a fixed amount of electrons. And one of the things that we've talked about here at this council, and you've seen a number of items already, including retaining consultants to actually do the design. We've actually entered into agreements with SoCal Edison to actually facilitate the interconnect. And the big project that we've been working on at SCLA is to increase that capacity to allow an increased flow of electrons so that we can actually keep up with the growth that we're experiencing out at the airport. Because that upgrade to the existing interconnect, is how we call it, is a multi-million-dollar venture. We've actually considered a number of things, including the fact that the 2007 bonds have been paid down substantially from their par value of $83 million, I believe I said. We saw it more so as opportunistic for a couple of reasons. First, to help improve the cash flow position for the electric utility to fund that capacity upgrade. But then secondly, we have talked about it many times here with the existing lease revenue bonds being secured by the pledge of assets. It's actually impacted our ability as a city having that pledge on city assets and actually doing things such as upgrading facilities. So there's a number of motivations here, many financial, but there's some also practical operational issues as well that's been motivating it. So it has little to do with any connection to COVID is why we're moving forward. Instead has more to do with satisfying the cash needs of the electric utility and helping improve the operational needs for the city by eliminating that security pledge.
So since VMUS is about the industrial customers and commercial customers, so then it doesn't affect the residential customers when they need to pay any types of fees that are going to be allocated with the 60 million, right? It's just industrial customers?
It's just industrial customers at SCLA and Foxborough. Those are the rate payers. There are not any residential customers of the electric utility. So it'd just be the rate payers at the airport or Foxborough that would be responsible for effectively satisfying the debt.
So because this is for improvements of specific things, do we know specifically what that improvement looks like and is?
Well, yeah, through design, we've retained designers to actually design a number of improvements to the existing circuitry that we call an interconnect. The interconnect is a physical connection of wires that are held up by power poles that eventually connect to transformers that serve our distribution system out at the airport. So it's largely a physical improvement to the circuitry to basically increase the flow of electrons to customer growth at SCLA.
And how long has VMUS been in operation?
2004, 2001.
The municipal utility was formed in 2001, and I believe we began serving customers in 2004, 2005.
Would you mind repeating that? It's very low.
We formed in 2001 and started serving customers in around 2004, 2005.
So we've seen enough revenues that it would sustain bringing in the 60 million bond and then going from there is my question next.
Yes, and that's actually a large part of the team's role in doing the financial analysis. The financial advisor that we have on staff helps us calculate that. And so, yeah, we've actually gone through a very exhaustive fiscal analysis to determine that the electric utility can actually afford this debt service.
Okay, and then in layman's terms, what does this mean? The 2022 bond will be limited obligations of the city secured by a pledge of net revenues of the electric system and the other collateral pledge under the indenture. What is that referring to? What does it mean? The term indenture, all that bond in 2022?
So, and I mentioned the various bond documents. The indenture is one of those, and the bond documents in the aggregate effectively define the entire structure of this transaction. But all that's saying is effectively the net revenues of the electric utility service are what's the security to pay back these bonds.
So finally, do we have a chart or a flow chart that indicates what improvements I know you talked about interconnections, but I'm not familiar with what you were talking about.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because this particular item is not focused on the interconnect, we did that maybe a year ago when we actually awarded the design work to the consultants, and then we did it again maybe 6 or 8 months ago when we approved the interconnect agreement with Edison. That would have been most likely when we had diagrams available. Certainly, that's something I can provide separate and outside of this conversation if so needed. But because this item is not dealing with the flow chart of how the electric utility system works is why we don't have that available for you tonight.
So the agreement delineates all of that. We can't venture out and do some different improvements. I just want to make sure we're staying within the recitals.
The project improvements are basically defined to be what we've just described, which is also outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Member Gomez. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Metzler, I think you may have touched on this, but before I begin, thank you so much, Councilwoman Becerra, for pointing out that we're simply refinancing our debt. And through this restructuring, our debt is going to allow us to free up assets, but in addition, we're going to issue at a fixed interest rate rather than a variable interest rate.
And just to be clear, just to add on to that, there is what we would refer to as a new money piece. So there are effectively in sizing, say at the $60 million, there is new money available, and that new money is what's used to actually help cash flow the improvements at the airport.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And so all of my questions were answered during the agenda review, but just to be clear, so issuance is expected to be closed around May 19th?
That's our current target date to close this transaction.
Very good. All right, with that said, it's appropriate for the chair to invite a motion from the Victorville City Council and the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority Board of Directors.
Madam Mayor, motion to approve both recommendations and go forward?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second, and we're going to move on to discussion on the pending motion, beginning with Member Becerra.
Discussion.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
No discussion.
Thank you. Member Becerra.
Gomez.
Member Gomez. I have you on my mind.
Yes. So yeah, the matter obviously is not something that is very simply stated with the questions I believe that the council poses. And I believe there's not enough time to be able to ascertain a lot of it, but I do appreciate the level of detail that you provided for me to make a rational decision on how I would vote for something in this manner. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Gomez. And the chair has no discussion on the pending motion, closes the discussion period. Madam Clerk, will you please take the vote?
Councilmember Becerra. Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. So the City Council and the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority Board of Directors has taken action in accordance with the recommendations set out on the agenda. We're now going to move on to our next business in order, which is public hearings. And that is item number 1. This is an approval request for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development required 2022 through 2026 Consolidated Plan and Fiscal Year 2022-2023 Annual Action Plan, allocating Federal Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Program funds, and a request to authorize the allocation of Community Development Block Grant coronavirus funds to a subrecipient of the previously approved Community Outreach Program. Mr. Metzler, will you tee up the item, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. First, I want to thank you and Councilmember Becerra. You both were appointed back in December by your colleagues to serve on a committee that's actually very instrumental in allowing us to bring this item forward with a recommendation. So I, along with staff, thank you for those efforts, and your recommendations carry forward, most specifically as it relates to the action plan, which I believe is recommendation number 1. But with that, and this item altogether is feeling routine for me, and maybe that's because I've been here with this organization for so long. But first, the 5-year con plan is an item that helps generally govern what our needs are from a HUD perspective, and so this item is dealing with your consideration of a con plan for the 5-year period of 2022 through 2026. The annual action plan, which is something we deal with annually, and if approved, actually becomes part of our fiscal budget for the 22-23 fiscal year. But in this particular case, it recommends the award of approximately $1.986 million in HUD entitlement funds that we receive. We also call them CDBG, but there's also a couple other items as well. I think what most of the public typically comes for when it comes to this item is what you find on page 16, which actually lays out staff's recommendation with respect to the funding levels for those grant applications that we received. And the application process for us always starts in December. So it's a fairly long process from December to now, but we actually have funding recommendations on page 16 that highlight those recipients of funds. So with that, the author on this item is your city planner, Mr. Scott Webb. He's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Madam Clerk, the recommendation, please.
That the Honorable City Council conduct a public hearing to receive citizen, public, and agency comments regarding the draft 2022 through 2026 Consolidated Plan and Fiscal Year 2022-2023 Annual Action Plan. Approve Resolution Number 22-034, adopting the 2022 to 2026 Consolidated Plan, the 2022 to 2023 Annual Action Plan, and the 2022 Analysis of Impediments to the Fair Housing as presented for submittal to HUD, which contains the funding recommendations made by the Community Planning and Development Grant Subcommittee. Approve the allocation of $60,000 in CDBG-CV Community Outreach Program funding to the SEMBA Center to provide services in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents for submittal to HUD.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. All right, we're going to move on to our public hearing. And the chair opens that public hearing to receive public testimony. And again, public testimony on this is going to have to be specifically related to this item. So with that, Madam Clerk, do we have any requests in chambers to speak?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, any requests by Zoom?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Our first speaker is Ralph Brown.
Good evening, Mr. Brown, and welcome to our meeting. And again, this is our public hearing item, and so testimony is confined to this topic. Mr. Brown, are you with us? So, Mr. Brown, we see your hand raised. Are you with us? All right, so Madam Clerk, if there's another speaker, let's move on and we'll certainly come back and give Mr. Brown another try.
Yes, our next speaker is Roger LaPlante.
Good evening, Mr. LaPlante. Welcome again.
Hello, Madam Mayor and City Council. Yeah, this is a good thing. We're going forward to try to bring down the cost of housing by bringing in HUD grants. That's a great thing that you guys are doing. Keep that up. If it helps the citizens, if it helps the residents, it's absolutely something we need to go forward on. It will help with the homelessness problems. That's part of it. So thank you for taking it to the next level and trying to provide some relief to the working families out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaPlante. Madam Clerk?
There are no additional speakers.
All right, can we try Mr. Brown again?
We can.
Mr. Brown, are you with us? One more time, Mr. Brown, are you with us? All right, Madam Clerk, will you kindly set the timer for 30 seconds in the event that Mr. Brown or any other audience member that might be experiencing technical difficulty might have an opportunity to speak should they desire.
Madam Mayor, 30 seconds has elapsed and there are no additional speakers.
All right, with that said, the public hearing is now closed and the chair brings this item back to the council. And at this point, a motion is in order from the council as to points 2 through 4 on item number 1. My apologies. So any questions from the council? Beginning with Member Becerra.
Just to bring it out, Mr. Metzler, how long has the city been dealing with CDBG?
Oh, you're testing my memory.
I'm sorry.
We've been an entitlement city since about 1998, and as an entitlement city, that's what allows us to receive these funds.
And to receive these funds, all of these organizations that we deal with, they're required every year to reapply, to give in certain paperwork that we require of all the funding that we've been given, because we're held accountable for their funding, correct?
That is correct. There's a number of requirements that applicants are required to meet before first becoming eligible. But also, as you stated, there has to be a reapplication every year, and performance does factor into the consideration for those applicants that are applying on a recurring basis.
So we don't just award these monies and then next year hope that they spend them the way our employees here, are held accountable with them to make sure everything is held to the utmost best standard. That's why we're continuing receiving CDBG money, correct?
That is correct. If we had issues of compliance, then certainly HUD could choose not to fund us as an entitlement. I will add, one of the things that we do require are audited financial statements from the applicants. So we do make sure that all of the accounting is properly analyzed to make a determination as to the funds being necessary and that they're spent appropriately.
And we only continue receiving more money to how well we we do our program. There we go.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you to you and the staff. Great, everything well done, and all these organizations will be able to help our kids and people here in the desert. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Becerra. And Mayor Pro Tem, did I hear you correctly that you had no questions?
I'm happy to see that we have people that are gonna do the work.
All right, thank you. Member Gomez.
Yes. What percentage of the CDBG funds go to the Victorville departments approximately?
I'm sorry, I'd have to calculate, but, looking at, page 16, you can see where there are city departments receiving those funds. So if you added all of those up and divided that by the total funds, that would give you your calculation. I just don't have the calculator handy to do that right now.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 out of 5, 6, 7 is receiving a certain amount of allotted dollars. Is there a reason why we don't use the grant, I think it's the grant committee, to ensure that more of the money goes out into the public in terms of being able to provide services of something that the city already provides? It just kind of, I think as an entitlement city, we can be offering more services out there with these fundings, and it could be just mixed in with, we're allotting quite a bunch, right? I said 4 out of 7. So would you, do you know what the rationale is for that?
To answer the question, the committee does look at that, but also HUD offers advice and guidance on an annual basis to encourage just that more and more money goes to the community. So we do balance that as a part of the ultimate deliberation in how we craft the recommendation on awards.
And since we have code enforcement and the planning department to some of these abatements and demolitions, do we ever create any kind of model for marketing so that when it's required or needed, we actually facilitate the financial burden on some of the nonprofit organizations that might need that, rather than, just have staff kind of go out and ascertain with their eye what's required? Do we ever have anything of that to kind of mitigate between the city and what's happening out in the ground?
Well, we do have programs that communicate to help those that are awards. So I guess I would answer it that way.
Okay. And then I'm also looking at very few organizations that applied. I don't know if it's because there was not enough put out there, or maybe there was, but not enough people believe that we had enough money. I mean, we have a lot of money to give out. Very few organizations. Do we have an outreach program of any sort, or do we just rely on what was stated between, they'll just come back if we've checked their balances and whatever they're doing is just great and they'll just get more money next year?
No, we actually do a press campaign, an awareness campaign before applications are even made available to the public. We do promote the program and the opportunities using all of our forms of communication here at the city, which include social media, email blasts, where we do web postings. So we also publish in the local paper. We attempt to reach as much of an audience as possible because we're trying to encourage more and more applicants. And we do that leading up to a mandatory applicant training that's required. And typically it's done in December, and maybe it's still done in December. But we do a fairly extensive outreach to try to promote the program availability.
And for these,
Time is up.
thank you.
Thank you, Member Gomez. All right, Mr. Metzler, so just to be very clear, when an applicant is granted monies, that's our staff monitors how they're performing as to the expectations on the grant.
That is correct.
Okay. And that's all I have on that. And we did have, I think, in comparison to years past, we did have quite a number of applications.
We do. We always have more applications than we actually give award to.
Right. So a lot of scrutiny is placed on the actual application that's presented. And we do help the applicants to the extent that we can to complete those applications so that everyone has a fair crack at the grants.
That's correct. And one thing that we've done, and I'll just make note because it does tie into an item later in the agenda. This is one of the years where I think we're making recommendations at dollar amounts that are probably at the healthiest levels than we ever have. We've had to stretch the money over a number of applicants, and we were able to, as we're recommending in a later item, to use ARPA funds. We were actually able to pull some of the applicants that applied for CDBG and recommend funding for them out of a different fund, which actually made it easier to give larger sums in these awards to these applicants.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Now, the chair invites a motion from the council.
Madam Mayor, motion to approve staff's recommendations 1 through 4.
2 through 4. Thank you. And is there a second?
Second for 2 through 4.
Thank you. So we have a first by Member Becerra, second by Mayor Pro Tem Irving, and we're going to take discussion on the pending motion, beginning with our maker, Member Becerra.
Great job, staff. Great job.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd like to echo my colleagues' sentiments. Great job. And I'm happy to see those who were funded, and I'm looking forward to seeing the good work that they're going to do in the community.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
I am Mayor Pro Tem.
Excuse me, Member Gomez.
Yes, I'd like to bring the following term, the appearance of impropriety. It's a term that I use because I want to make sure that when we look at what we saw when we're giving out fundings, it doesn't look like we're just giving the city of Victorville with code enforcement. So hopefully that's not the perception that was given out. And if it was, hopefully next time when we look at this, we can start using the code enforcement to ensure, nonprofits that actually need demolition or any kind of assistance reached out primarily to have some of that funding.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Gomez. So I would like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. The staff has done a tremendous job in putting this all together for us, and they did an outstanding job in doing all of the background work to bring it to the ad hoc committee so that we could make sound decisions and grant the monies in the most appropriate way that we could see fit to do. And with that said, the chair is going to close the discussion period. And Madam Clerk, will you please take the vote?
Councilmember Becerra,
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving,
Yes.
Mayor Jones.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. All right. Congratulations, staff. All right, we're going to move on to our next business in order, which is the consent calendar items 2 through 9. This time, it is appropriate for the council and the council acting in its various capacities to approve action on consent calendar items 2 through 9 in accordance with the recommendations presented on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a first by Mayor Pro Tem Irving and a second by Member Gomez. Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Councilmember Becerra, Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving,
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So the council and the council acting on its various boards of directors has taken action to adopt the recommendations as presented on the agenda. Moving on to item number 11, this is consideration of funding allocations to community development block grant. That was item number, no, we did the public hearing and then the consent calendar. Yeah, so
Item 11.
item 11, consideration of funding allocations to community development block grant applicants for eligible services through the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. So yes, this item is the somewhat of a companion item to the public hearing that we just spoke to, that I was alluding to. And so in this particular case, and just rehashing a little bit of the past, As we all know, we were a direct recipient of ARPA-related funding, and it was quite a bit of money. I believe it was maybe $36 million or so. But anyhow, we had made a presentation last year, and particularly on September 21st, 2021, among the buckets of funding that we had programmed monies towards. At that meeting, we'd actually identified about $2 million be used for homeless related services. And upon being given that direction, we actually undertook an application process similar to what we did when we were providing funding assistance to offset water bill delinquencies. We actually followed a similar process to solicit applicants and award money effectively to to help those that provide homelessness related services that required some COVID relief. And unfortunately, we were only able to award at the since that time $100,000. So we still had quite a bit of money available unprogrammed. And so with that, we actually used the CDBG process that we just talked about. And we did identify a number of applicants through that process that had relatable services to what this council originally intended to spend that $2 million on back in September. So we identified a number of applicants, which those applicants being recommended as eligible are found on page 717 of the agenda. But this item is recommending the award of another $530,000 of funds to these applicants. So with that, the author on this item is your city planner, Mr. Scott Webb. He's certainly available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Madam Clerk, will you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable City Council authorize staff to proceed with the allocation of funds through the American Rescue Plan Act to fund eligible community development block grant applicants as outlined in attachment A of the staff report. Approve the distribution of American Rescue Plan Act funds utilizing the reimbursement and tracking model that is typical of the community development block grant funding requirements, and authorize the city manager or their designee to execute all necessary documents and contracts.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on to technical questions for clarification as it specifically relates to the staff report. We're going to begin with Member Gomez.
Yes, so how would the appropriation of funding have been affected if we would have reversed? So CDBG, we would see these nonprofits being provided with an allocation and vice versa, if there was any effect.
Well, it's not an effect we necessarily could very easily consider because not all of those applicants that we awarded under the prior item fit into the original intent of this council relating to the $2 million appropriation back in September.
Okay, and consideration of the funding allocation for CDBG and the ARPA plan. Were we able to bring them together because they're basically one and the same? We're using terminology that I don't know if legally can be binding, or it's just probably language to say, hey, we use ARPA funds because CDBG couldn't come and, you know, meet the needs of these organizations.
Well, I think I've already kind of touched on it, but I can say it again, and that is if we did not consider the use of these funds, which again, we do believe the use of these funds and the recommendation are actually compatible with your original intent. Had we not pursued this, then effectively these number of awards would have actually and more likely been eligible under the CDBG program, but it would have actually forced us to have to award lesser amounts if we still intended to make a recommendation to award all those applicants.
Okay, and what method was used to streamline these awarded applicants? Was it a first come, first serve, or what did we use?
We used the process that I again mentioned to where we actually solicited. We made an announcement about the funding opportunity, the notices to participate in mandatory workshops, there was a deadline established for all applicants to submit the deadline. And upon that time, once the deadline elapsed, then staff was then able to start reviewing applications and determine of those application, which ones were eligible and which ones were not. And then from that, it took the eligible applicants and then brought it forward to the CDBG subcommittee to form a recommendation.
And would you mind reiterating the amount of allocation in this particular item and what would be left over with ARPA funds?
Let's see. So this item particularly is $530,000. And we've already awarded out of this $2 million pot, $100,000. So that's $630,000. So the difference is, sounds like 1.27 million, maybe. My math is right without a calculator.
Okay, so for that leftover, and I call it leftover, but not, it's not the appropriate terminology. Are we continuing to offer within the same rigors to their nonprofits? Or will we consider?
I don't believe staff is discussed that any further. That's something that we'll have to discuss further and come back before this council with a recommendation.
But can that 1.2 million be used for the same purposes, or they can be allocated for something distinctly different?
It would be for these purposes. To do something distinctly different would be inconsistent with the directive of this council, and that's not something staff would do.
All right, so I appreciate the level of detail, and of course, if you're being repetitive, it's because obviously I need repetition. It's a lot of money and a lot of money that the community wants to get a hold of. And if they don't know how to ask, and if I've asked on their behalf, I think I've done some due process for today. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Member Gomez. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I have one basic question. I understand how we come to award these organizations with funding. Aside from pulling from the pool of CDBG applications or applicants, is there another reason why we're exceeding the standard for the ARPA funding? In other words, we're kind of holding them to a higher standard because we're applying some additional requirements. We're using the, what is it, the reimbursement and tracking model? That's not necessary for others. Is that correct?
I don't necessarily believe we do that for ARPA awards, but I'm going to ask Mr. Scott Webb if he can speak to that maybe a little bit more clearly than I can.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Metzler. Good evening.
We can't hear you.
Hi.
I'm sorry, how about now?
Yes.
Is that better? Okay. Yes, so obviously this is based off CDBG funding, but we do have flexibility to not hold them to the same rigors as CDBG recipients. So we will work with the city manager staff to finalize the reporting requirements and how the money is transacted. The most conservative route is to do it on a reimbursement basis, where we track the services that were provided and then we reimburse them. That would be similar in matching what we do with the public service recipients for item number 1.
Okay. The only reason I'm asking is because on page 717, it mentions that I believe it does, at least based on my understanding, that to hold these organizations accountable. In other words, we were going to use the reimbursement and tracking model for them as well, because we were treating them as CDBG applications. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
If the
There was no
council
other
gives
rationale.
different direction, we could definitely lessen that reporting requirement because these are our ARPA funds. But we would look to the council.
I just wondered if there was another rationale aside from them being organizations that were pulled from that applicant pool. There isn't. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And could everyone hear the speaker all right in the audience? If you had difficulty, could you raise your hand? Okay, so Madam Clerk, might we see if we can get the volume turned up on that, because we certainly want everyone to be able to hear clearly. All right, Member Becerra.
Just a quick couple of questions. Mr. Metzler, we're held accountable to HUD for CDBG funds. Who are we held accountable for our ARPA funds?
Department of Treasury, I believe, is,
The federal government?
it's still federal government, yes.
Okay. So, but we are held accountable for our ARPA funds. We just didn't get the check and deposit it and say, let's start cashing it.
R- Right. Yeah, the Department of the Treasury is the entity that was responsible for establishing all of the guidelines for the ARPA funds.
Okay.
And the way the funds were dispersed, they were basically dispersed into two tranches, half of which we've already received, and the other half, I believe, we're expected to receive in June of this year.
And if we award monies of the ARPA funds that are misused, we're going to be held accountable, correct? Along with
Yes,
a committee that we gave the money to.
yes,
Okay. So we need to basically keep a very close eye on ARPA funds just as well as CDBG funds.
yes.
Thank you. No further. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And so just for purposes of clarification, Mr. Metzler, there's no due process involved in this particular item. It's more about a proper process. Is that a fair way to say that?
Yeah, due process is not the right way to describe it. We do want to have a process in place to properly administer and ensure, to be able to ensure that one way or the other, we're complying with whatever requirements are imposed upon us by the grantor of the money.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure that there was no misunderstanding, that there was any kind of potential or any litigation involved in this. All right, with that said, the chair invites a motion from the council.
Motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Thank you. We have a first yes, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a first by Member Becerra, second by Mayor Pro Tem Irving. We're going to take discussion on the pending motion, beginning with the maker, Member Becerra.
Discussion. Thank you. Great job, guys.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Member Gomez.
Yes, in this item, there was 8 organizations, and I didn't realize that they were going to be held to a slightly, what I would consider higher rigor than what CDBG was, but I understand that ARPA is monies that were allocated, and as an entitlement city, the staff members need to ensure that the monies do come back, but I don't know if that would have been, if there's an alternative way so there's not so much pressure on the organizations, but I'm sure those organizations that have been chosen have probably done this, so it probably magnified and made it easier for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gomez. All right, and the chair has no discussion on the motion and closes the discussion period. Madam Clerk, the vote, please.
Councilmember Becerra.
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. So the council has taken action in accordance with the recommendation laid out on the agenda. Moving on to item number 12. And inasmuch as items 12 through 14 are substantially similar in that the recommendation for each is the purchase of a truck, Chair invites a motion to consider items 12 through 14 concurrently. If any member is so inclined, please feel free to say so moved.
Second.
All right, so we have a first by Member Becerra, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Irving. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote on that, please?
Councilmember Becerra. Councilmember Gomez.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving. Mayor Jones.
Yes.
Motion passes with Councilmember Gomez voting no.
All right, with that said, the council has just taken action, just so everyone is very clear. We're going to consider items 12 through 14 together rather than separately. And so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and read the titles of each of those. Item number 12 is the approval for purchase of an International Bird Camp FP5 flameless patcher truck. 13 is the approval for purchase of a Peterbilt MB Longline Striper. And item 14, approval for purchase of an Ariel Altec bucket truck. Mr. Metzler, will you kindly tee up all 3 of those items?
Thank you.
respectively?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Yes, in all 3 of these cases, we're dealing with equipment used in our public works operations, whether they're dealing with roads or traffic signals. And so these items altogether are replacing old aged equipment that require increased maintenance cost due to their old age, just to keep operable. So these items allow us to put those older units in reserve and allow these units basically to go into primary service. Whether it's to patch roads or to actually stripe the roads or fix our street lamps or street lights. That's effectively what these equipments are doing. These are all what we would characterize as piggyback purchases where we're relying on cooperative purchasing agencies to satisfy our bidding process. So with that, I believe all of these items are authored by your Director of Public Works. That's not correct. Items 12 and 13 are authored by your Director of Public Works, and then item 14 is authored by your City Engineer, and they're available for any questions or comments you might have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Metzler. With that said, Madam Clerk, will you kindly read the recommendations for 12 through 14 respectively?
That the Honorable City Council approve the purchase of an International Bergkamp FP5 flameless patch truck from Bergkamp Pavement Preservation Solutions in the amount of $292,302. That the Honorable City Council approve the purchase of a new Peterbilt MB Striper from JX Truck Center in the amount of $427,073.22. That the Honorable City Council approve the purchase of a 2024 Ford F-550 Aerial Altech Bucket Truck Model AT41M from Altech Industries, Inc. in the amount of $211,915.02.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we're going to move on to technical questions for clarification as it relates to all three items. And we're going to begin with Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I have some real basic questions. I noticed that we're using Sourcewell again. Is this going to be an ongoing trend, or is this just, for these three items? And more importantly, what municipalities in California are frequently using this type of entity like Sourcewell to make purchases for city vehicles and so forth?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I would be surprised to find a city not relying on cooperatives such as Sourcewell or others. It's actually a fairly common practice, first to comply with the purchasing requirements, but also allows to save on tremendous amount of costs associated with staff. And then, of course, time that goes into bidding. So I couldn't name the city specifically in Sourcewell's case. I'd have to follow up with you on that, but it's a very common practice in municipal government when it comes to purchasing.
Have we done it in the past? So I probably wasn't paying attention then. Buying new vehicles.
We have.
I know about piggybacking and so forth, but.
And that's really the same thing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. It's just Sourcewell is on the radar for me now. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Member Becerra.
Mr. Metzler, you must have called that equipment old like 4 times. I remember it coming into the yard.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. On the pavement patcher, on the striper, and on the bucket truck. All of these items are to serve our citizens. They do nothing else but to serve our citizens, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you. Member Gomez.
What method was used to ensure a competitive bid if one was initiated or considered for this particular item 13 and 14?
Well, we rely on the actual cooperative, and before we even select the cooperatives to work with, whether it's Sourcewell or I think there's another one in here other than Sourcewell being relied on as well. Yeah, National Joint Powers Alliance. I'm sorry, that's the same one. But anyhow, we're selective, and we also make sure before selecting one to work with that they actually do a competitive bidding process similar to the process we use here.
So, and what you're saying is that the city did consider a competitive bidding process before it decided to use a cooperative such as Sourcewell?
No, that's not what I said.
Would you mind reiterating what you stated? Because that's what I understood.
You're going to have to restate your question, please.
Absolutely. So, did we use or consider anything else besides the cooperative?
We may have considered doing it ourselves, and if we did, we likely would have considered the amount of staff time and the costs associated with it and compared it to whether or not there was already a bid for the similarly natured product undertaken by one of the piggyback or cooperatives.
So we don't know for sure. We're just assuming that it might have been considered, right?
I don't know for sure.
Okay. For 13, this item is nearly $500,000 in one swoop. How is the process being democratic?
Can you repeat that question?
Yes, this item is nearly $500,000 in one fell swoop. How is this process being democratic?
Well, it's not democratic because we're not effectively, as a part of the bid process, asking for anybody to vote. We're relying on an entity to actually conduct a competitive bidding process to submit bids so we can determine what's the most cost-effective price for the good or in this case, the equipment we need to satisfy the job.
So if you look at this one, you're telling me that we actually went out for bid on this one?
We are relying on the cooperative or the piggyback agency to satisfy the bidding process.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that when we go out and do the bidding process is as democratic by not casting a vote necessarily, but ensuring that there's a level of individuals coming so that they know, well, we're going to have this bidder versus that bidder, but a cooperative doesn't seem to bring that. So I was trying to understand how it would have been more democratic in that sense. And how can we ensure the bidding process to be a viable option in these two types of purchases that the city brings forth to the city council? And I'll extend it to the 14th one.
Can you restate that question again, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. Were you busy talking to, or were you, was someone talking to you? Because my time gets eaten up every time you ask me to ask the question, and I don't know if it's.
Your question wasn't very clear to me. I'm sorry.
Okay, because I saw Sophie talking to you. I should make sure that I'm not, if she's talking to someone, I reserve my times to allow my time to be expended appropriately. How can we ensure that the bidding process is viable as a viable option in any of these purchases, that anything that the city would bring forth? So I'm looking for viability.
Well, I would say viability starts first as your municipal code provides the legal framework to actually entertain this type of a process. And then you have to rely on staff. Staff is hired in professional capacities to do work associated with bidding and determining the best process to satisfy the bidding requirement.
Thank you. And lastly, what is the piggyback for this item refer to? Number 14.
Well, the entity that would satisfy the piggyback is, in this particular case of 14, is Sourcewell.
And is this item a capital project priority that was addressed by council in former meetings?
Not a capital because this is equipment, and this would have been something identified in the budget.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Member Gomez.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Metzler, so using agencies such as Sourcewell to bid on these actually saves time, which really equates to money for the city. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And my understanding is it correct that for each of these, I mean, the average is lead time to actually get our hands on them is 12 months to 2 years and beyond?
That's correct.
So really, it was very important for us to be able to use these firms to help us get this process going because these are needed assets in our city.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that said, the chair invites a motion from the council to adopt individual staff recommendations for items 12 through 14. If anyone agrees, please feel free to say.
Second.
Right, we have a first by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Member Becerra.
For clarification's sake,
Sure.
Um,
Well, a point of order is a
Yeah, so,
clarification, but you can certainly ask. a
so I have a
question.
point of order and I'm planning to clarify something.
So, okay, so Member Gomez, a point of order
Mhm.
is asserted when there's a breach in policy and procedure. None has happened, but if you have a question for clarification, the chair is happy to
Yeah,
respond.
so in the past, I've said point of order for clarification, so I appreciate your
And
interpretation.
and it's not an interpretation.
but I-
The chair has clarified that in
Yes,
the
I
past.
admonish, I'm trying to speak and you're not allowing me.
Because the chair.
So I'm
has-
asking for permission. If you want me to do it any other way, please direct me to do so.
Can you pause a
I
moment? Just-
have.
Okay, so I just, this is not meant to be a tit for tat. I just want to make sure that we're clear because the point of order gives the person asserting it a right to interrupt a speaker, right? And it's always done in the case when there's been, an alleged breach in policy or procedure. This hasn't happened. And so if you have a question for clarification, that's all you need to ask is I have a question for clarification.
Well, I have, but you've always corrected, say there's no such thing as point of clarification. So I just want to
Oh, I
be,
said you can always ask for.
so I just want to be recognized to speak.
Sure, and if you hold on a moment, there is not an assertion that you can make according to Rosenberg's that is a point of clarification because then that takes you to the next level of being able to interrupt. We don't
So
have
I would like to be
to
recognized.
ask a question to clear up some confusion, most certainly. Yeah,
So I would like to be recognized so
Yes.
that I can now consider the comment that I had
You
for this
betcha.
particular item.
yes.
So you stated a couple of things rather quickly for me to capture them. You stated something about individually voting or something like that. I thought they were
No,
all
Because
together.
we're taking up, yeah, I get it. So we're taking up items 12 through 14 concurrently. And so we're going to make one motion and one vote. The chair invited a motion to adopt the individual staff recommendations for items 12 through 14. So whatever's posted on the agenda for items 12, 13, and 14, chair invited a motion. We received one by Mayor Pro Tem Irving and it was seconded by Member Becerra.
Thank you for that clarification.
You bet. All right, discussion on the pending motion, Mayor Pro Tem.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Member Becerra. Thank you. Member Gomez.
No.
Thank you. And the chair has none. Discussion period is closed. Madam Clerk, the vote, please.
Councilmember Becerra. Councilmember Gomez.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes with Councilmember Gomez voting no.
Thank you. So the council has adopted the recommendations on items 12 through 14 respectively, as was posted on the agenda. Moving on now to item number 15. This is the purchase of Cisco switches, web filtering appliance, and firewall software. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item is particularly dealing with equipment necessary effectively inside our four walls to help accept the bandwidth coming to the outside of the building for internet communication services and effectively allows or enables us within our system here to be able to accept the 10 gigabyte of data service that's provided to the doorstep. So this is a number of equipment upgrades to our computer systems that effectively will allow not only our internet speeds to improve, but allow our systems, a whole bunch of our systems to operate much more smoothly. So with that, the author on this item is your interim IT officer, Mr. Matt Pugh. I believe there he is on Zoom. He's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. All right, Madam Clerk, the recommendation, please.
That the Honorable City Council award the purchase in the amount not to exceed $273,831.34 to Logicless, Inc. for the installation and configuration of new Cisco network equipment, licensing and software that will support a 10 gigabyte internet circuit for the City Hall local area network.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. We're now going to take questions for clarification as to the staff report. We're going to begin this time with Mayor Pro Tem. Again.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
You bet. Member Becerra.
No, I believe libraries are able to connect to a different level of service through the telecom company, but perhaps I'll ask Mr. Pugh to speak to some of the other facilities that perhaps are not on here and maybe why they're not on here.
Thank you, Mr. Messler, and thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes.
Thank you. And I apologize, Councilmember Becerra, I was not able to hear your question.
What I did notice that the library isn't on here from page 802. Is it because it's a public use computer system? Most of everything on 802 is all used by city employees. What I did notice is the library isn't here. Is it because it's public use?
Yeah, excuse me. The library is on a separate internet connection through an organization called Scenic, and it's already on a 1 gigabit internet connection, which is adequate for the facility.
Okay, thank you then. That's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, of course. Member Gomez.
Yes. Why are ARPA funds for network equipment just over $250,000?
Cisco equipment, especially switches with this kind of capacity, are fairly expensive in the realm of just computer equipment overall. We are receiving or will be, should be receiving this equipment at a significantly discounted price through the cooperative purchasing agreement, NASPO. But that's the market value of the equipment that's being proposed to be purchased.
And typically, what funds or funding do we use for matters of this item?
Typically, we use general fund, but the specifications of the resolution from July of 2021 to spend ARPA funds specifically to enhance the broadband capacity of the city would be appropriate for this purchase, but generally general fund is used in other years.
Okay, so is my interpretation when I saw that same exact wording, broadband for the city, I didn't envision the actual employee system division partaking. I actually envisioned the general population of communities that we could probably have a Google out there that our residents would partake of that. So then that's an interpretation, but that's not what's being housed within this item, right?
Correct. Generally what this increase in capacity is going to do is allow our websites that serve the public to perform better, such as our permitting portal, our city website, and our billing payment portal. So it does benefit the public as well as allow our employees to perform their work more efficiently by having faster internet speeds.
And wouldn't this funding be better put to spend in the community for services like our neighborhoods and for nonprofit organizations? What rigors or measures were used to consider this item as a qualifiable ARPA allocation of funding?
Well, Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'll try to answer that. First, we already are providing funds for those other organizations. And in fact, there's an item or two that we've already attended to on this particular meeting using ARPA funds for that exact purpose. But effectively, we continue to rely on the framework originally approved by the council when first awarded the 36 or so $million, where we established buckets, for lack of a better term, as to how we want to try to spend those funds. So we're effectively relying on that framework. This particular item, as Mr. Pugh alluded to, one of the priorities in the rules that came out from the Department of the Treasury, there was emphasis in spending money on these types of improvements because certainly with COVID and the increased dependency upon things such as Zoom communication, Wasn't something that we were as versed in before the pandemic as we are now. But I guess the point is the increased dependency on that has shown everybody the need to make investments in things like broadband and equipment related to the broadband so that we can continue to operate this way, say via Zoom or distant operating.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Member Gomez. And the chair has no questions and invites a motion from the council.
Proof, staff's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second discussion on the pending motion, beginning with Member Becerra.
Discussion, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
No, ma'am.
Thank you, Member Gomez.
Yes, always when we receive any type of funding, I'd always like to see probably 99% of it go out into the community. I mean, if you walk the streets, you understand why I say that, but I've also understood that we also need to have an increase in our network and our broadband as well to be able to be serviceable to the general community. So thank you for some of the clarification that you provided tonight.
Thank you, Member Gomez. And the chair has no discussion on the motion, closes the discussion period. Madam Clerk, the vote, please.
Councilmember Becerra, Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving,
Aye.
Mayor Jones. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 16. This is and by the way, on that, the council did adopt staff's recommendation is posted on the agenda. Item 16, Old Town Sidewalk Connectivity Projects, Phases 1 and 2. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Staff's identified what we would commonly characterize missing link sidewalks in the Old Town area. And because we received TDA Article 3 grant money, we've actually identified as an eligible expense the use of those grant monies to fund basically 2 phases of missing link sidewalk projects in Old Town. So the 2 phases include one scope that is about 2,300 feet of sidewalk, including 38 curbs and 25 drive approaches. A second phase includes about 3,400 feet of sidewalk, 16 curb ramps, and 31 drive approaches. And so with that, the author on this item is your city engineer, Mr. Brian Gangler. He's certainly available for any questions or comments you might have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Metzler. Excuse me, Madam Clerk, the recommendation, please.
That the Honorable City Council authorize the submittal of claims and requests for reimbursements for TDA Article 3 funds from the San Bernardino Transportation Authority for the Old Town Sidewalk Connectivity Phase 1 project in the amount of $244,000 and the Phase 2 project in the amount of $246,640. Authorize the city engineer to certify the completion of both projects.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, questions as it relates to the staff report, beginning with Member Becerra.
No questions.
Thank you, Member Gomez.
Yes, what types of damages were observed and documented, if that was the case, to the assigned sidewalks where this money may be going towards?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This is dealing with missing link sidewalks, which is effectively meaning there is no sidewalk. So this would be actually installing concrete to serve as a sidewalk. So in those particular cases, those are the conditions observed, is that there wasn't sidewalk.
And how often are such funds received by the city to, mitigate and go out and observe and ensure that the city becomes better?
Related to this particular item, TDA, I think maybe the question is best served and answered by Mr. Brian Gangler. And I think the way I interpret the question is with respect to TDA, how often do we get these funds to take on a project such as this?
Thank you, members of the council. Every 2 years, there's a call for projects that comes from the SBCTA.
I'm sorry, I have a hard time.
Every 2 years, there is a call for projects from SBCTA, the Transportation Authority. And so we have a chance every 2 years to apply for a grant.
Okay, and maybe it was already responded, but I don't mind when you're very redundant because I ask questions based on the perspective of my understanding. So why are these not maybe other things besides sidewalks?
Well, this grant has specific guidelines. You can apply for transit facilities, sidewalks, or bike paths. And we thought that the Old Town projects were very good candidates for this type of funding.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Member Gomez. Mayor Pro Tem.
Questions, thank you.
Thank you. And the chair has none. Invites a motion from the council.
I like to move this item as recommended by staff.
Second.
Thank you. We have a first by Member Gomez, a second by Mayor Pro Tem. Discussion on the pending motion, beginning with the maker, Member Gomez.
Just maybe, this is the first thing that I've seen TDA, SBCTA fundings. So I don't know if it's something new, but thank you for coming up, Mr. Gengler, and helping me understand some of these topics.
Thank you, Member Gomez. Member Irving.
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Becerra.
No, no question.
Okay, thank you. And the chair has no comments. Discussion period's closed. Madam Clerk, the vote, please.
Councilmember Becerra. Councilmember Gomez. Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, so we've taken action in accordance with the recommendation laid out on the agenda. Moving on to item number 17, approval of agreement with AGA Engineers Incorporated for 7th Street traffic signal modification plans. Mr. Metzler, tee up the item, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So we've been successful receiving a highway safety improvement grant for the ultimate upgrade of 5 traffic signals along 7th Street. And that award is effectively for the hard costs associated with the upgrading of those signals before we can actually get to a construction stage. Design work is required to actually spec the work. And so with that effectively is our match to the grant award. So this particular item is bringing on an engineer to actually perform the design work for those 5 identified traffic signals and develop a scope of work so that ultimately the construction can be bid out. So as we're asking for the award to the design firm and if approved, you will see something similar to this item again when the design is complete, and we're going to then be asking this council to award for the construction. So with that, this item also is authored by your city engineer, Mr. Brian Gengler, and he's available for any questions or comments you might have.
All right, Madam Clerk, the recommendation, please.
That the Honorable City Council approve a consultant professional service provider agreement with AGA Engineers, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $90,000 for preparation of plans for the modification of 5 traffic signals on 7th Street.
Thank you. All right, technical questions for clarification as it relates to the staff report and more specifically to approving the consultant professional services agreement. And we're going to begin with Member Gomez.
How is it determined that these areas were desirous of modification plans for it to merit an agreement?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm going to defer that question to Mr. Gengler.
Thank you, members of the City Council. For this type of a project, we need consulting services to prepare the plans for the traffic signal modification. So we really need the expertise of a consulting firm. That's why we advertised an RFP to evaluate proposals from different consulting firms for this project. Does that answer your question?
Well, let me reframe it. I was just wondering why on 7th Street and maybe not, maybe other 5 signals is what I meant to ask.
I see. So every year we get an opportunity to apply for a highway safety improvement program grant. And the grant guidelines are very specific, and they're based basically on accident data. And so every year we evaluate that data and apply for what we think would be a competitive grant. And so that this was one of those projects where we thought it would be a good project to upgrade the traffic signals in Old Town. They're old. A lot of them don't meet our standards. And so, fortunately, we were approved for a grant for these 5 locations.
Okay, and then would this be a prime project? And I call it a project because there's money going to be appropriated for a cooperative agreement?
No, this type of a project would be competitively bid. So when we're ready to advertise for construction, there would be contractors bidding on this project.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Member Gomez. Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
No, I don't have any questions, but I want to thank my colleague, Councilwoman Gomez, for asking hers. Thank you. It gave me greater clarity. Thank you.
Sure, Member Becerra.
Thank you. Mr. Gangler, B Street's probably 80 years old. Forest is probably just as old. We're now going to upgrade the what I read, we're going to upgrade the mast arms. Are the cabinets and the signal heads also going to be upgraded?
Yes.
Are we going to connect them for, I don't know, internet? I don't know if we want to call it that, but are they going to connect with each other like the other signals up 7th?
That's a good question. I think we were planning on replacing the, there's existing conduit there, but it has copper cable in it. I think we were planning on putting fiber in there to interconnect.
So it's all going to go up fiber and then the mast arm and everything. Okay. Thank you very much. No further questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sure, thank you, Member Becerra. And the chair has no questions on this. Invites a motion from the council.
Motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. We have a first by Member Becerra, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Irving. Discussion on the motion, Member Becerra.
No discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
No discussion.
Thank you, Member Gomez.
Not at the moment.
Thank you. And the chair has none. Discussion period's closed. Madam Clerk, the vote, please.
Councilmember Becerra. Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 18. This is consideration of revisions to the Victorville Municipal Code amending the city manager's purchasing authority threshold from 50,000 to 125,000. Mr. Metzler, can you introduce the item, please? Ms. Smith?
Sure, I can tee this up. So at the council meeting of March 1st, there was a request and a motion by council to bring an item back to raise the city manager's purchasing authority. Unfortunately, just due to the timing involved in the noticing requirements to bring that ordinance back, we were unable to make it onto this meeting of April 19th. So this item is requesting that the council allow that to be brought back at the May 3rd meeting so that we can properly notice that municipal code change in ordinance.
All right, very good. Thank you. And Madam Clerk, the recommendation, please.
That the Honorable City Council approve moving the revisions to the Victorville Municipal Code to the May 3rd, 2022 meeting.
Okay, thank you. Questions, beginning with Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I have a question. I recall the meeting very well where Councilwoman Becerra asked that we bring this item forward. Is there a reason that it went from 250 to 125? Did something prohibit us from increasing?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Where I'm going with it, okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Not so much prohibiting, but certainly there was a dialogue amongst myself and the council based upon the survey information. And certainly the council had the prerogative to go ahead and raise that limit, or suggest we bring back the ordinance to raise the limit to 250. But there was dialogue seeking my feedback as to what would be a comfortable level based upon the nature of the work of this city. And I was recommending a level much more in line with 100 to 150, believing that 250 is too much for a city
Is that
manager.
enough? The reason I'm asking is because I know mid-sized public agencies, their CEOs have just a tad bit more than 125. I'm asking, is that enough?
I believe that this item of $125,000 is enough for this type of city.
Okay. Did you do a survey?
We did.
And so other cities around town, I mean, not around town, but in the region, it's
Yeah.
not 125?
Yes, yes, it was in that 100 to 125 for similarly natured type cities. The ones that were at the 250 level, those were your big cities, if I remember correctly. San Jose, Los Angeles, San Diego. Don't quote me, but it was much bigger cities like that.
But they don't have a city manager in LA. They have a mayor.
They have an administrator, yeah,
Okay,
different structures.
okay.
Okay, thank you, Member Becerra.
No, great.
Okay, thank you, Member Gomez.
Yeah. What gaps can the council no longer have an agendized item when a potential increase of $50,000 goes to $125,000?
I'm sorry, your question was what gaps?
Yeah, so I presume that the purchasing authority power that you have had was $50,000, which means if there's an increase, even if it was just $10,000 more, which would allocate to 60,000, that means that there would be information that would no longer be a requirement to come to the city council because you have the purchasing power and there's no need for the council to take a look or discuss it in a public setting. So I'm just understanding, what would that gap be?
I don't know how to answer that question. It's not making sense as it relates to this particular item. The discussion that we had at the last meeting had more to focus with the limitations that exist at the current $50,000 level and the difficulty we're finding in being able to purchase goods and services as quickly as possible. The best example that we've brought up 2 meetings ago, in fact, involved the purchase of vehicles. And just considering where we are at in the world of trying to buy a vehicle, first, if you can even find a vehicle, the prices are much greater than my purchasing authority. And there's not a lot of time to act given the scarcity of vehicles, and that applies to other products as well. And for us to go through the process of trying to award, whether it's through bid or relying on, say, piggyback, there's too much time that elapsed. We don't get the vehicles, and so that's becoming a problem in that it's affecting our ability to operate. So when we evaluated raising it and from the $50,000, it was evaluating what does it need to be to help us be able to respond more quickly to the types of goods and services that we really need to be able to procure quickly.
Okay, thank you. And this is very relevant to the question because I'm thinking, if we can't understand how 50,000 affects for an increase of 125,000, and if there's a purchase of $100,000, I mean, I just know it's not going to come to the city council because there's really no need, because you would have the authority to ensure that that goes through. But listening to your rationale about being expeditious and ensuring that things get done in a timely manner, which I'm sure the city has a lot of things that need to be conducted, not just twice a month. Wouldn't the council be able to use the mayoral special meeting power to bring anything that needs to be expedited so that you have a full council, and then the development of our constituents understanding, hey, we need to go through this really quick, 72 hours. I'm just trying to understand, there's certain gaps that I can foresee based on this. And I just wanted to see if you could provide an example of something like this. And my next question was, would you be able to memo in the councilship to know how your purchasing power is going so we can assess what's happening and if what you have is even ample? That's what Leslie Irving was asking. Is
Your
that
time is up.
So, Madam Mayor and members of the council, the calling of a meeting in the form of a special meeting and being able to do that quickly isn't really answering the problem that we have by having a low purchasing authority. Your municipal code provides a number of purchasing requirements that take a much longer period of time for us in the event there are amounts greater than that. So again, this is just providing additional flexibility for us to respond much more quickly to purchase goods and services.
All right, thank you, Mr. Metzler. So I understand that Member Becerra has some questions after all. And before I get to that, I just want to remind the council that this item really is to talk about moving the revisions to the May 3rd meeting. And so the chair has given a lot of latitude on this. And I think it was necessary because Mayor Pro Tem wasn't present for the last meeting. But with all that said, Member Becerra, do you have additional questions?
On a question, it's kind of going with Mr. Metzler in the sense of you being able to spend 125,000 99.99% of the time. It's been approved in the budget that we approved the year before, correct?
That is correct.
Anything that you may be spending and we want to check on the way you're spending, all we got to do is look at the budget the way it was presented to us, that we voted for to pass anyway.
Yeah, and I would say it differently, and we touched on it at the last meeting, but I think it is a good point to bring back up. You know, just because the spending authority is established at X, and in this particular case, that X is equal to 125,000 is what we're talking about. That doesn't give me the blank check. It does have to be within the approved budget.
Thank you. No further. Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha. All right, so just in the spirit of making sure that we're all on the same page on this. So because this will come back in ordinance form, which was the direction in our last meeting of the council, moving this to 125,000 puts you in your estimation at a place where you can make the decisions you need to without business being hindered, while allowing the needed transparency to our public.
I do believe that.
Okay. And then I don't recall, I mean, we had a lot of cities that were on that list in the last meeting. I don't recall anyone hitting that, even a $200,000 mark. I might be mistaken, but
I'm going to pull that agenda item up, and I can.
I could be wrong, but
if you like, I can.
and we didn't know, we couldn't find any real common denominator in all of those anyway, right? Because the way each city did its business and different things. And okay, so Lancaster and Fontana had 125,000 each, but nobody hit the 200,000 mark. Oh no, we do. We have San Diego and Santa Monica. Okay, so I stand corrected. But for our city and the way our city operates, you're comfortable with the 125,000 mark?
I am.
And if you decide at some point in the future that that's not sufficient, because we certainly know we have issues of inflation, right? You can certainly bring this back to the council and ask for increased authority, purchasing authority.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. With that said, the chair invites a motion to move the revisions on this to the meeting of May 3rd.
So moved.
Okay, we have a first by Mayor Pro Tem and a second by Member Becerra. Discussion on the motion, Mayor Pro Tem.
No.
Yeah, I have a question on what you just stated.
Okay, hold on. We're in the middle of comments, so.
No, but I don't want to comment. It's what you stated. I didn't understand. We're moving it to May 3rd. I just.
It's the recommendation posted on the agenda. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Member Becerra?
No.
Thank you. Member Gomez, comments on the motion?
Yes, so I just realized that we're not gonna necessarily vote on the item tonight. I mean, that's why I asked for clarification. It's gonna be moved to the 3rd. I'm not sure what the reason is and if it can't have a vote today, but I did hear something about there has to be a resolution. And I don't know if it's procedural, but if it is, I guess I'm answering my own question. And then if it's not, I'm still kind of confused as to why it would be moved. If my question is not answered as I have placed it in the comment.
Sure, thank you. And I think it's a worthy question to ask. I think it was addressed in the very beginning of this, but if someone could respond again so that we're all clear.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Yes, in fact, it was addressed as a part of the very original preamble to introduce this item. And that was that this item basically is being brought because we were directed specifically to bring this item back at this particular agenda date. However, because it's involving a municipal code amendment, there is a public noticing process that must occur. And I believe it at the least requires 10 days of posting 2 times before the actual ordinance is to be heard by the council. So effectively, we did not have sufficient time since the direction to conduct the noticing properly, and therefore we're satisfying the direction of the council to bring this item back, but it's not ready because the public noticing has not been satisfied.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Metzler. And the chair has no comments and closes the discussion period. Madam Clerk, will you please take the vote?
Councilmember Becerra, Councilmember Gomez,
I'm sorry, hold on. So the recommendation is to move this to May 3rd, yes.
It's the motion, yes.
Right, so I'm just making sure that what I'm voting yes on is to move this item to May 3rd.
That was the motion.
Perfect, yes.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving,
Yes.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So the council has taken action with the recommendation posted on the agenda. Moving on to item number 19, city manager reports. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. On the engineering side, Arrowhead Drive and 7th Street, from the Green Tree to Bear Valley Road pavement reconstruction, that work is continuing down Arrowhead Drive between Green Tree and Nisqually. We've also got the Green Tree Extension Project, and notices have gone out to where we're affecting Hesperia Road, 1 lane in each direction. On the planning side, you've heard, but we're not done. It's an issue that we've been monitoring very closely. The listing of the Western Joshua tree being considered as a threatened species, even though Fish and Wildlife is recommending against it. It's not a done deal yet. And that issue will eventually be decided by the Fish and Wildlife Commission at its June meeting. We'll be monitoring, and we're working with allied agencies in that regard, hoping that it does not get considered as a threatened species. On the building side of the house, our wellness center, we did issue the building permit on the 11th of April. The groundbreaking is tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. And then finally, still making great progress out at the airport. The Amazon project, the building now is fully erected with roof structure. So if you haven't been out there to see the progress, it's coming out of the ground, and it's pretty impressive. So with that, that's all I have at this time, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Item 20, this is discussion and possible action regarding upcoming agenda items. Member Becerra. Correct. Member Gomez.
No.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. And the chair has none. Moving on to item number 21. This is our final item this evening, and it's reports from council members. Now, Member Becerra.
I would like to give props to Mayor Pro Tem Leslie Irving. If we get, no one has said it, notice the lights?
Yes, I did. I've been excited all month.
What lights?
The blue lights.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I checked that out.
I'm looking up here.
No, I do have a question. Are we able to change the coloring? Yes? Thank you very much. And also, I attended the Spring Festival this Saturday. It was great. Thank you to all of our employees that participated. They were there talking and meeting with the public and everything. Great job on with our employees. Great job. The kids enjoyed it, at least mine did. Thank you.
You bet. Member Gomez.
Yes, my council reports are always, I'm out in the street consistently, making sure that I'm helping my constituents in many ways, dealing with their emotional issues and any resources that I can be. Happily, I had a couple of donations of baskets, and I was able to give children in bus stops a free basket and kind of engage with them and listen to their story. So that was another way that nonprofits have helped me allow to give something of value to a child that, you know, is at a bus stop. So, or at the washing machine. I take the time to go to areas where potentially children may, you know, not receive something ample, like a 99-cent store where their parents go. So that's my report for being out in the community and trying to engage families in different ways. And I thank nonprofits who provide me and give me that leeway to give something of value to a child.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This past Saturday was very busy. I did get a chance to attend the Spring Festival. It was very well attended. Children were having an abundance of fun. It was wonderful. I also stopped by Burning Bush Church. Yes, and they had a family outing there. And I would like to announce something. I have officially crossed the Burning Sands over into Delta Land. I am a part of the sisterhood of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So I just want to congratulate my other sisters, the Line Sisters Sorors, say congratulations. And I don't know if you know it, but this is one of the largest public service organization sororities. So thank you very much.
Congratulations, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And so this is the first year that I haven't been able to attend the Spring Festival. I had a little bit of a mishap and wasn't able to put shoes on. So I had great plans to go to that, as well as, I got that kind invitation from Burning Bush and wasn't able to attend that. So, so that's to my regret. And then as per usual, just attending meetings as required of me on all of the outside agencies that I was appointed to. And with that said, I have no further comments. And so we have no further business before us, and our meeting this evening is concluded. And so as a matter of housekeeping, all council members, staff, and audience members will kindly vacate council chambers in City Hall within 10 minutes. That's 8:19. So that these facilities may be cleaned and secured for the evening, and members of the public are not permitted behind the dais. With that said, everyone, thank you for a great meeting. This meeting's concluded.